Hey guys, how are we doing today? Hopefully everybody's doing well. We are got quite a little bit on the agenda today. I've got 3 different wraps I'm trying to get CP straightened and tie off. I've already got one on the dryer, which is what you guys are probably hearing in the background. This one is one I did a couple weeks ago now. It is the Iron Cross Spider pattern. I found it in Visual Wrap in the new download patterns. What I'm going to do is, after the initial wrap, I usually go back and try to straighten it before I take pictures. And as we all know, when we're sitting here staring at a wrap for hours and hours and hours, we have a tendency to miss things as we're looking at them. So I usually let them sit for a day or so. This one kind of waited a couple weeks because I was trying to get it into a assembly line kind of thing, if you go there. And what I'm going to do now is go back and pick it apart basically and make sure everything is straight, everything's filled in before I put the first coat of CP on it. This is all Madeira thread on this wrap, so it all needs CP in order for it to retain the color. Once that coat is dried, I'll come back and tie it off, and then it'll go through the next 2 coats like that. So one of the biggest things about decorative wraps is learning how to manipulate the seams. Okay, you can do some really awesome wraps, and you can get them packed pretty well. A lot of the things that stick out the most to me as far as wraps are concerned is how that seam looks. Depending on how you wrap, depends on what your seam is going to look like. If you're wrapping in bands, you're going to have a zigzag going down the thing. There's no way to make that a perfect seam. If you're wrapping in singles like I do, you have the opportunity to make a completely straight line, as long as you care to. So basically everything is pretty much running on this straight line, which is exactly where it needs to be here. But if we come across over here, we can see that this starts to drop down right here at the spider, and then it kind of picks back up again over here. So for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this seam ever so gently. You don't want to move too much thread at once, because when you're done wrapping, you don't want to open up too much space, okay? Because every time that you move something, you're moving it elsewhere as well. So I'm just coming through here and moving this line just a wee bit. Okay, and I've got to check and make sure it's right up there and up here. Okay, and you're just trying to get that seam as straight as possible. Okay, and then we're going to continue looking at this one. Now it peaked up just a wee bit there, so actually what I have to do is take the blue and push it down a little. And then my orange on the inside is doing some funny stuff, but because of where it's at, I'm going to have to leave that one. And then push this one down just a wee bit. Okay. And that's really all you're doing with manipulating the seams. Let's go back across here and just check. I've got a pickup spot right here where it went up just a little bit more than what it was supposed to. So if you need the seam to move down, you need to push down on it. If you need the seam to move up, you need to push up on it. Every time you do that, you're going to manipulate how that seam looks. And it also helps to tighten the pattern too. Okay. Now right here in this section, okay, well, I just moved it. You see that little hole that is somewhat formed there? What that is the threads just aren't quite as close together as they should be. So usually what I do is just get in there and push it down, push it towards each other. Okay. And then if you need to, you can burnish it, but burnishing, you need to do that only when you know that the seam is perfect. And that's where you want your threads to stay, because if there's any kind of little gap and you go to burnish it out, yeah, it goes away initially. But when you go to put CP on it or epoxy, when thread gets wet, it expands. So if there is a section where you had some gaps showing, then even with burnishing it, those gaps are going to reappear when you put CP or epoxy on there, or both. Okay? There's just no way around it. You know, and some wraps, depending on how intricate they are, depends really on how perfectly straight you can get them. And sometimes you just have to say it is what it is. There's a lot of different things that you can do to manipulate the seam. Like, I'm not going to stress out about, you know, one little thread that's kind of kicked over this way. Because once epoxy gets on it, the seam mostly disappears anyways. But I am really trying to get it as straight as possible. And sometimes whenever, depending on how your pattern forms, if it's being wrapped in, you know, you need to pack it out. If it's being wrapped outwards, you need to pack it in. And when you get done with wraps, sometimes you can manipulate by just dragging your tool across the seam to stretch those threads back out a little bit. You see here, when moving that to straighten it up, I actually made space here, so now I've got to come back here and fix this. So that's what I'm saying. You got to really be careful about how much space you actually are moving stuff around with, because you can open up a hole and then you're mad. Alright, so that seam, I'm happy with that one. Go to the other side. And we've got this one in particular. This one's pretty obvious. This one's running in this straight line right here. And you see when we get over to the blue how much it kicked down below. So that one, I'm going to have to pick that one up. Tighten it. There you go. Manipulate that one just a wee bit. Whoops. Oh, open up space. This side's actually pretty decent. Alright, now this one right here, you can see it's kind of doing this little lean thing going on up here. All that is that this side actually didn't get packed down as well as it should have been. And sorry if my hands are getting in the way, guys. I've got the camera in a different position than I'm normally used to working with, so. And then push it back just a wee bit. Everything about doing the seam manipulation is working in very, very small steps. You do not want to, you know, manhandle the threads, so to speak, because you don't want to open up spots. Now, right here, this is where the blue is just slightly peeking through. Now that's one little spot that I will take and just burnish, because that spot is pretty tight. And then I'm just making sure that all of my loose threads are tight. Sometimes you'll see me put my finger on them. I haven't quite figured out if that actually helps or not. Sometimes I feel like it does. If you've got one that's poking out like this and you just cannot get it to stay tight, if you're feeling brave, you can go in between down here, because what's pulling it apart is these threads that's underneath, and push them that way so it cinches it up. Just be careful not to, you know, make sure you don't have a very sharp tool that you're working with, because you don't want to pierce the threads, because Lord help if you pop one at this point. And that's pretty much it. So at this point, all I'm going to do is just do a quick little glance. I'm pretty happy with how this looks. And over here, this is another part. When I start to do CP, I only CP where I'm going to start my tie off. This particular pattern, I had problems getting it as close to my turnaround as I normally do. And this being top side, oops, sorry, bouncing the camera on you guys. I'm actually going to cut it. Sweet. I'll be able to cut it right here. So what I'll do is I'll apply CP from here all the way down to where I'm going to cut it on this side. Which, if I'm cutting here, I have to do a full pattern, so I'm going to be cutting it there. Right there, so it's even. Everything's good there. Alright, so I'm going to put CP on it. You don't want to put CP on the spots that you plan on cutting, just because you don't want to have to cut through dried glue. To get a not lumpy tie off, you have to cut your threads at an angle to keep it from lumping up on you. I'm just going to stir my CP. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but I use Chromasil. I literally am using the back end of one of those cheap paint brushes that we use. You just stir it. I swirl it to get the excess off. Get rid of it with a paper towel. And I'm going to apply this on speed. So I'm going to take the power wrapper and I'm just going to turn on the foot pedal. And this is the very first coat going on this one. So once we get a CP on it, you'll see it basically turn colors. Make sure I get my line, which I'm going to cut it right here. Alright. And it's bouncing because it has a paracord grip. Let's take that stand down so it doesn't jump so much. And all I'm going to do is apply it on speed. This is the easiest way I have found to put epoxy or CP on. And I can see how even it goes on or how thick it's going on, if I need to pull extra off. And when I get done with it, I'll show you guys what it looks like. My first coat of color preserver is always going to be, it's not really heavier than the other ones, but I will go back and make sure any high or low spots where the threads were crossing over each other are completely covered. And this is about I think I ended up wrapping 12 inches to keep 10 inches of wrap on this rod. Alright, now I'm going to make sure that I don't go too far. Yep, that's where I'm cutting it, right there. Yep. Alright, so that's what it looks like with the CP on there. I've got one little spot where I didn't get enough on there. Right here. So I'll just kind of do a light paint there. And this is just to make sure, because a lot of this orange that's on this rod is kind of underneath the other threads. You just want to make sure that you've got a good even first coat. I'm going to do 2 more coats on it like I always do. So, you know, if everything didn't quite get completely covered this go around, I'm pretty much going to be safe. But I do want to make sure that everything's had a chance to be completely coated. Otherwise, I'll have areas in the wrap that will turn darker than other areas. And see, this didn't even get any on it. So even though applying on speed is easy and you can get it done pretty quick, you do have to make sure you go back and just check behind yourself and not just assume that it got covered. It would be a sad, sad day to come back in 20-30 minutes and then not realize that you hadn't covered certain spots, and you go to put your epoxy on and 6 or 8 hours after your last coat and you got a spot that's bleeding really bad because you didn't get it covered well enough. And I'm not trying to soak it, I'm just trying to make sure that I got, see, that's got a little bit too much on there. Everything else is fine. I'm going to pull that extra off. Just like that. And she'll go in the dryer, and in about 30 minutes, well, in about an hour, I'll come back and I'll go to tie it off, and I'll keep going with the other 2 coats. If you have any questions, just hit us up in the comments, or and then if you want to keep up with anything that we're doing as far as on the YouTube channel, just follow Palmetto Rod on YouTube. And you guys have a great day.